Thank you, Madam Chairman. Mr. Lynn, I'm going to stay right with you and kind of on this same topic. I think everybody is concerned about Google and Facebook and their control over the news. And one of the things that, as we prepared for this hearing, and I thank you all for being here with us, we went through and looked at this issue, the market as a whole. It's not a right or a left issue. You know, you have Huffington Post that lost 50 reporters last month, and then Bloomberg let 100 people go last month. But what we are seeing is across all the newsrooms, and I think there are 16,000 newsrooms in the country, and every one of these newsrooms have experienced the loss of reporters, which is the loss of journalism, which is the loss of the insight of the people into issues. That is being replaced. You look at Google's ad business, and what you are seeing is that they are going for clicks and the clickbait type issue, and this is something that does concern us. When you look at the connection between what they push forward as news and then, of course, the connection to their ad business. So I want to ask you about that. When you look at this connection along the lines of market dominance and the abuse of market dominance, then what is the direct harm to consumers when you connect the dots from the news agency through Google and Facebook that are now trying to be the dominant distributor of news back to the consumer and what they're able to hear?
Well, I think, in terms of the consumer, as consumer, the harms, and thank you for that, Senator, the consumer, as consumer, the harms are you end up with less information, you end up with less oversight of large corporations, you end up with less oversight in terms of consumer safety, you end up with fewer people sort of watching over the governance of the main street in your community, because we've lost in this country, there's all kinds of different numbers, but we're talking about tens of thousands of journalists who were walking the streets of our communities, looking, opening doors, looking into, problems. Tens of thousands of journalists are no longer out there. And you mentioned just, the people at Bloomberg and my friends at Huffington Post. This is so this is a true crisis. But we should also understand that this is very much a crisis for citizens, consumers as citizens. I mean, the information that they are getting, it's being choke pointed through fewer and fewer outlets. And I think we have to understand that the advertising there's another side to this. It's not simply the starving of journalism. It's the replacement of journalism with a system of that is designed to provide people with misinformation, with propaganda. It's a system that is designed to manipulate people. Google, and especially Facebook, these are manipulation systems, manipulation machines. And Google and Facebook, they rent out their machines to whoever happens to come along to manipulate other people. That's, and what the result of having these manipulation machines, these Babel machines in the middle of our society is the incitement, enraging, sort of atomization of the citizenry. And so we have people who should be working together instead fighting with each other in the streets.
And also, there is an invasion of privacy component for citizens also, correct?
That is absolutely right. I mean, it's like, what is these manipulation machines, what they trade on, what they use is what they learn about you. I mean, they study every single move of you. At this point, they're studying the movement of your eyes. They're studying your voices. They're They're studying the movement of your hand on your phone. They're studying, they gather all this information and they use it to better manipulate you. So it's this invasion of privacy is in itself a bad, but it is used to manipulate you in ways that harm you as a citizen and harm the larger public and harm our democracy. It's all one problem. And the center of this is the fact that we've never applied anti-discrimination rules to Google, Facebook, and Amazon.
And you mentioned the monopolistic conduct of Google with its ad business. Where do you see that running afoul of the Sherman Antitrust Act?
Well, I think there's actually now we have a case in Texas, which is based in large part on sort of monopolization of advertising, so I think we now have people who are acting on this belief. But in terms of, what we see really is we've seen a duopoly, a capture of control over advertising. Google and Facebook together, online advertising, you're talking, depends on whose numbers you're using, 60, 70, 80% of online advertising, two corporations. That's a monopoly problem by anybody's standards.
Okay. Mr. Slover, I wanted to come to you. Facebook. Do you think they should be required through government action to compensate reporters and journalists for the news reporting that they work very hard to produce? And what other ways can the FTC and the state AGs find to rein in Facebook? And the current lawsuits, how do those lawsuits signal to Mark Zuckerberg that his days of moving fast and breaking things are coming to an end?
So I do think that's a big problem. I think that the journalists who create the news have a right to profit from it. And it's one thing to provide a link to the source. It's another thing to appropriate the source and to market it as your own and to use it for your own profitability at the expense of the publisher. I hope that that is something that the antitrust laws can reach into and correct.
Thank you for that. And I have to tell you, sometimes I look at what you're talking about where they appropriate this as their own. And it is almost the same thing that we deal with China every day on. They steal our intellectual property, but do not compensate the innovators or the creators that have brought that forward. So thank you very much, Madam Chairman. Thank you.